I don't hate bugs. I like bugs and I think they're neat. There's some that I'd rather have stay far away from me, but I spent my childhood gathering caterpillars off the road before they could get crushed, and my years living in California collecting snails and snail shells. The snails there were very, very big. There are a lot of snails where I lived, so I could just pick them up and just carry them around. I could pick up most bugs with my bare hands and not get grossed out or freak out over it, and one of my friends is even into handling insects more than I am. But even through that, I did have my incidents where I've gone on the wrong side of insect-themed adventures, and today I'm going to tell you about them, including the most horrible bug-related incident I had in my senior year of high school. But first, the art for today's video. This month is the 3-year anniversary since I started my The Magnus Archives / Infinity Train crossover comic, Not Quite Somewhere Else. I wanted to get a new update to post on the day of the anniversary, and thought, hey, why not record a page or two? My comic drawing process is not the same as how I draw pages for In Harmony or for The Shepherd of Oblivion, so I thought it would be fun for this year to record a couple of pages. Also, if you like the Magnus Archives, you should go read my comic, and also absolutely go watch Infinity Train. I am going to forever be salty about it being cancelled. Now on to my insect stories. Now a lot of these stories are bee and wasp related, but I wasn't really scared of bee and wasps, with the exception of when they flew around me. However, I was scared of mosquitoes, and this started from a presentation from my first elementary school. Now I don't know if everyone's school did this, as this was the only school I went to that did, but my very first elementary school, and no, I went to like 3 different ones because I moved around a lot, had these presenters come in all the time to talk about random subjects. For one, we had an author of a book we were reading in class come and talk to us about how she wrote the book. And other times they get people to put on shows for us. And I don't remember if they were for like something specific, but they were different from the usual DARE program stuff. Pretty much almost every single school I went to had perform at some point or other. One of these times was from some scientist. I don't know exactly what she did because it's been so long since that had happened, but when she came to her school, she came specifically to talk about mosquitoes. And she proceeded to tell us about mosquitoes, the dangers of leaving stagnant water out for them to breathe in, but the big thing was the diseases and spreading malaria, and how mosquito bites led to people getting it. And this did poor little things, and this did things to poor little Daryl's mind. Normal kids thought quicksand was going to be the scariest thing to deal with as adults, but for me, it was the prospect of dodging every mosquito I saw, and narrowly avoiding getting malaria every time. Now imagine almost 20 years later when I first listened to the Magnus Archives and got to the Blood Bag episode, the 7-year-old me would have had nightmares if they had to listen to that. But it led me to be scared of mosquitoes for a long time afterwards. Like, I almost kicked my mom in the face once for holding a dead mosquito out to me, freaked out. And at this point in my life, I think I worked through it. There's only so many times that you could get jump scared by a giant mosquito in Fallout 4 before seeing one in real life gets old. Trust me, I've gotten jump scared by so many blood bugs. Looking at bugs' faces don't typically bother me. I think it's more of the real life presence of just being in the vicinity of a bug that did. Now, I don't remember how old I was when this happened, but around this time I moved to a small house in a new city in Virginia. My family was living there, just me, my mom, and my brother, and our dog. And I believe we had a cat at that point, but also this was like around the mosquitoes presentation happened, so I don't remember all the specific details. And we spent about a year in that house. And that house stands out to me in a lot of ways. One, because it was where my dad lived there before, so I already knew the house before we moved in. But 2, because the place was haunted. And it was the only place I apparently slept walk in. And there were multiple times where I would wake up in my mom's room in the morning instead of my own room, but where I had fallen asleep the night before. And there would be noises and footsteps in the middle of the night that would wake up my family and our dog. But it's not the ghosts that got to me having this place so vividly in my head. It was the fact that this place had a horrible infestation of camel crickets. Now, because I'm not showing bug images here, just not to scare my bug-fearing followers, if you don't know what a camel cricket is, they're these brown striped crickets with weird humped backs. Not quite like a camel, but definitely not the usual shape of like what you would imagine a cricket to look like. I only ever saw them in basements, and in this case, a downstairs playroom my mom had set up for me and my brother. It wasn't exactly a basement since it wasn't underground, but it was at the lowest level compared to the rest of the house, and basically served the same purpose. We realized how bad the infestation was in that room one fateful day. I had this bright green Easter beanbag chair, and it was comfy, it looked like a giant fuzzy rabbit, and it was leaning against like an outlet. I wanted to plug something into the wall, so the chair was against the outlet, and I pulled it back to get to it, and the whole wall and back of the chair were completely covered in crickets. Just like you could not see much of the wall at all. It was just a wall of crickets. And yeah, I still vividly remember that. It was so many crickets. And so luckily after that, we did set off bug bombs in the house, so got rid of it. But I still remember it. And so my family and I just, the shudder whenever we do come across the occasional cricket that gets in our basement, because that is just not something you can easily forget. Good times. And of course I do have stories that aren't just related to crickets. One time back when I was living in California, I went to an outdoor school, so everything but our classes were outside, and one of those days I was hanging out with my friend Aso, who by the way is a great artist, and you should totally go follow them. I have put a link to their YouTube in my description, but also you should go follow my friends. I love supporting my friends. Go follow them. And I saw this big black and orange bug flying around. Now, a couple days or weeks later before, it was like very shortly before this, but one of my classmates had brought in this like one particular bug to show to my science teacher at the time, and it was a weird bug. It wasn't the same bug that we saw, but it was a weird bug, and the teacher was telling them what it was, and I had never seen this big flying insect with bright orange wings, keep that in mind for later, flying around. So I said, hey, let's go and catch it. And we spent the rest of that morning before classes to catch this bug, but we were completely unsuccessful, so we went to class bugless and sad. Then years later, I had moved to where I live now, and Aso had moved from California, so we weren't living there anymore. And one day I was just scrolling through Tumblr when I came across an image. Surprised, because it was that same bug trying to catch those years ago, and I had a name for it. Hey!
Hey, what's up?
Not much, but do you remember that bug we chased around school back in middle school?
Yeah?
I found out what it was.
What was it?
A tarantula hawk. Now, if you don't know what a tarantula hawk is, or at the very least you've only ever seen a cazador from Fallout New Vegas, it is a type of wasp that hunts tarantulas, hence how it got its name. It also has one of the most painful stings in the world, next to the bull ant. So imagine my shock realizing what that is, and almost realizing that 1, we spent a good half an hour chasing the thing, and 2, there was a possibility that even if we didn't get stung, and we caught it, we would have showed that to the teacher, and possibly release a tarantula hawk into the classroom, because the thing we were trying to catch it in was a box. The classmate of mine who had catched their other bug had a pill bottle. I didn't have a pill bottle. I had a box, a cardboard box. So yeah, not disappointing, our bug hunting expedition didn't work. And it's not like I don't have any other flying insect stories. Back in 2021, the Brood X group of cicadas came out of the ground, so all summer when I walked to work through crowds of flying cicadas, because I couldn't drive during this time, there's just so many cicadas flying around. I even have a video on my TikTok for recording a bunch of cicadas on the ground on a tree by my house. In the first couple of weeks I avoided them because who wants to be approached by giant buzzing things that scream? But by the time the whole thing was over, I was grabbing them, holding them, even picking them off of me and throwing away when they landed on me, or I would just hold them for a bit. It's not like they had stingers and they couldn't bite. And I got so used to it because apparently there's going to be 2 more broods in my area again this summer. Luckily they're harmless, but loud, buzzing, screaming things. Speaking of harmless, so I do like bees. Bees are fuzzy little guys, they buzz around, and they do good things for the environment. Like wasps, They have a place in our ecosystem. I like honey, and I like to munch on things that look like honeycomb because the texture makes the brain goes burr. And I would totally buy one if the places that I knew that did not sell them for so much. And bees are beautiful, living creatures, and I wish them the best. But bees do not respect me. You see, I have been stung by bees a lot, and the worst part was the only time that I've been stung on that was an accident, that was my fault. So I was very little, and I was running outside my grandparents' house, and I ran into a flying bee, and it stung me on the neck. This was when I was really young. And after that, apparently bees decided that then they were pissed off, it's the perfect time to land on Daryl unprovoked and sting them. The most I ever got stung was while I was living in California, because there were a ton of bees around where I lived, especially by my school. At one point, I remember them having to block off a portion of the school because the bees started building hives on the campus, and they didn't want students to get stung. That did not stop it from happening. My PE class was near the canyon next to my school, because my school was right next to a canyon, and we were in the desert, and it's where the bees were always hanging out. And one time before a weekly mile run, one landed on me, and I didn't know it was there until it stung me on the thigh. It got me out of that week's run, but it still sucked. Then I got stung a second time that same year, waiting outside of a class when another bee landed on my hand, again, also stinging me. It's the perks of going to an outdoor school. Funny enough, the next time I got stung years later was in my senior year of high school. I didn't know it was a bee at first. I was walking to school and felt a painful sting on my wrist, and when I looked down, I saw the welt but no stinger. I at first thought it was a spider that had bit me because I was wearing a jacket that had been sitting in my closet for a while, and it was early fall. But I went to the nurse and she said it looked like a bee sting and sent me off to class. I am still amazed I am not allergic to bees. And that brings us to our biggest, final story. Because of that bee sting happened, it happened very shortly before the big one. So, buckle your seatbelts. So it was my senior year of high school, sometime in October, November-ish. It was cold enough that I needed a coat, but daylight savings time hadn't hit yet, and it was still dark enough in those mornings to not be able to see minuscule details, and that's important for this story. Because as I was walking towards a pizza place I pass on my way to school every day, I see one of my classmates, and he was passing by this electric box that was outside of the pizza place. And I noticed him take a couple of running steps, waving a hand around his head, but I didn't think much of it because to me it looked like he tripped. Some of the sidewalk is very uneven on the walk from the school, so I assumed he just tripped. Like I said, it was dark, so you couldn't really see much. And I didn't think much of it, and like an idiot, kept going. And I approached the metal box, and I heard buzzing. And instead of thinking hard about it, I kept walking. Like an idiot. To be fair though, there's a lot of roadkill around where I live, and sometimes it'll be around for a bit before it's picked up, so I thought it was flies and an animal had died. Even though I didn't smell anything, but I wasn't into collecting bones back then, so I wasn't familiar with how dead animals smelled. So yeah. So back in high school, I had long hair, which was shoulder length, which isn't super long, but it's a lot longer than my current hair length. And as I walked, I felt something in my hair, and I ended up brushing it out. And I thought it was one of the flies from the dead animal that flew into my hair, and I didn't think much of it, so I kept going to school. Then I got to school. I headed to the hallway that my friends and I hung out at in the mornings waiting for classes to start, and I was only there with one of their friends, so we sat and we waited. And that was when I felt the fly moving in my hair again. So I brushed it out, finally knocking it out, and I watched it fly up to the ceiling and hang out. And that's when I took a closer look at it, and I thought, that's pretty big for a fly. Then the friend's friend looked up and he went, "Whoa, you had a yellow jacket in your hair." And I felt my blood go cold. So you see, until kind of recently, I couldn't stand to be around anything that flew or buzzed. Bees, mosquito, wasps, all would set me off into an anxious, flinching mess. And at that point, I had been stung by enough buzzing things that I just couldn't help it. And as you can imagine, this began my nightmare scenario. Because at that very moment, the moment he said that, I felt something bite my back multiple times. Now, I had been stung by enough bees to know it wasn't a bee sting, only because it wasn't as painful as a bee sting, and I got stung recently enough to, like, remember how that felt, but it still hurt. And I opened my jacket, and another yellow jacket flew out. And so for the rest of the day, I had yellow jackets coming out of my clothes. I went to my anatomy class, and one crawled out of my sleeve and onto my homework. I went to the bathroom, and they came out of my shirt. I was working with a guidance counselor that year and excused myself from class to go to her, and much to the annoyance of another counselor, begged her to let me into the school courtyard to go through my things and try to get rid of as many yellow jackets as I could that did not involve me having to take all of my clothes off. And they ended up biting the shit out of my back, and I could still feel the bumps from my back for a long time after that. However, the good news is that they started, like, going away, so that's good. I am so surprised I didn't get stung at all during that whole period, because I was freaking out the whole day and terrified of, like, just, like, lifting up my shirt and seeing just bugs everywhere. I was so scared of that. I guess, like, mentally I was like, if I don't look, they're not there, but that still did not stop me from having to pull yellow jackets out of my clothes that whole day. It was a nightmare. So yeah, the yellow jacket incident happened about 9 years ago, and some years after that, I decided to make an effort to not jump and flinch at big buzzing bugs, and so far I think those attempts have been successful. I don't flinch anymore when I see those really cute, fat, fuzzy bumblebees anymore, and dealing with wasps and bees that come to my house has been easier. Not to pick them up with my bare hands easier, like with some insects, but easier. And I'm not scared of mosquitoes anymore. And I think recently my most successful attempt of handling a bug that has come into, like, a place that I am occupying, other than just, like, removing the occasional bee from my house, which usually takes me forever, was when a wasp flew into my French classroom last semester, and nobody wanted to be near it, and the professor was getting upset because nobody was paying attention because they were all freaking out over the wasp. So I picked up a plastic cup and a folder, and I just took it outside because I was just like, okay, I'll get rid of it because nobody else is going to. Usually before that, it would take me a lot longer to work up actually taking the bug out. So it's funny how things went. Maybe in the future I'll have a beehive. And that does it for today's video. I want to thank my friend Aso for providing their voice for a bit of this. And if you want to check out what they do, you should follow them on YouTube at MegaBadYef. They do amazing art and upload videos from their streams, so you should go give them a follow. They stream on Twitch as well, which is really cool. I like my friends doing cool things. You should go follow them on Twitch and watch them play video games. And if you're interested in reading Not Quite Somewhere Else, you can find the link to the comic in the description of this video. It has major spoilers for all of the Magnus archives and minor ones for Infinity Train. So if you're not caught up and you care for spoilers, wait until you're caught up with both shows before checking out my silly crossover comic. And if horror comics are your thing, I have a queer horror comic called In Harmony, which will be starting its second chapter this Sunday, so you should go check it out down below. I have also recently opened up my Patreon, so if you're already like In Harmony and you can't wait for the next chapter to drop, you can read the first 4 pages right now on my Patreon at the Myonic level. Patrons get updates 2 weeks early, and if you really want to see where the story is going to go, now is the best time to check it out. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye!